Siemens nuclear control systems. Because all of the Iranian nuclear facilities have pre-1980 Siemens controllers. So Stuxnet was developed as a weapon, a software virus weapon against the Iranian nuclear program. So here was Germany, again announcing to those people who know what they're doing, basically saying, this is an Israeli attack on Japan via the Stuxnet virus, and because we voted, along with Japan, on February the 18th, against the extension of West Bank settlements, we also consider ourselves to be potentially at risk. So rather than give them that opportunity, we're announcing right now, we're shutting down our pre-1980 nuclear reactors. Which meant that obviously there was no longer any way that the Stuxnet virus could be unleashed on Germany. But if Germany thought that that was sufficient to get away with it, they needed to think again. Because a few days later, we have the E. coli attack in Germany on organic cucumbers. Now, the fact that it was supposedly organic cucumbers, which of course had a devastating effect on Spanish cucumber farmers, but another reason for attacking organic is to try and demonise organic food. Germany has the highest percentage of 100% certified organic farmland of any nation in Europe. It's still a relatively low number, it's 5.4% of their farmland is 100% organic. But Germany has been one of the prime movers behind resisting the encroaching GM agenda and coming into Europe. So, having destroyed the organic cucumber market, it's then acknowledged, oh, it wasn't the cucumbers, no, the E. coli wasn't in the cucumbers, it was in the bean sprouts. But organic bean sprouts, so once again, we're going to nail the organic bean sprouts. And you'll remember that for a few days, there were articles on the front pages of the paper because there was 11 people dying in Germany, there was 4 in the UK, there was a couple in Norway, but they'd all come from Germany. So potentially we had this phenomenal outbreak of E. coli. And then it just disappeared, didn't it? It absolutely disappeared. Do you know why it disappeared? Because the Koch Institute in Germany established that the E. coli that had been unleashed was a laboratory culture. How did they know that? Because when they got hold of the virus, they were able to establish that the E. coli that had been released was resistant to all known antibiotics. This could not have occurred naturally. It had to have been developed in a laboratory and then released. So once the Koch Institute had established that this was no accident, this was no naturally occurring E. coli, this was a bio-warfare attack on Germany, this was just about to break into the mainstream media when obviously a deal was struck. Because having been caught red-handed, somebody obviously provided the antidote. And all of a sudden, it disappears. It's history. It's forgotten literally within a few days. Thanks to German awareness within the security services. And like I said, the massive attack here on organic food. Monsanto is a Zionist company, and Monsanto controls 90% of the GM food market, and the goal of Monsanto is basically to control the global food supply. And if you want to see more on that, then I've been talking about Codex Alimentarius for a number of years. In fact, I've been invited over to New Zealand in November because New Zealand has a food bill that looks as though it may come into law before the year end. And this is going to be the thin end of the wedge, because this food bill that's going to go in New Zealand will ultimately prevent New Zealanders from growing and consuming their own food. All on the grounds of food safety. How can your government protect you if you will insist on growing and eating your own food? You've got to buy their shit. Hey, it's outrageous. But, we're in a situation, when I recorded that DVD, the Codex Alimentarius agenda, 4 years ago, and I was making the observation that the agenda is to completely eradicate all natural medicines. All natural medicines. And the target was the EU. The other side of the agenda was to literally destroy all natural farming. And the target there was the US. And then what they do, you see, they go for globalisation, harmonisation, which is why now, right now, Australia is the target for carbon taxes, and New Zealand is the target for the first country to have legislation in place in a developed nation where growing and consuming your own food is potentially illegal. It's incredible. But when I made that observation 4 years ago, the natural health community in this country said, oh, get out of here. You know, that's just outrageous. That'll never happen. It'll never happen. On May the 1st of this year, a piece of legislation came into force called THUMPT, the Traditional Herbal Medicines Products Directive. From May the 1st of this year, all natural medicines are effectively illegal in the EU. When you go into the stores now, they can still sell any stock, and a lot of the stores still have stock. In theory, they can still sell stock for existing stock for the next 2 years. But what's happening in a lot of places, you'll go into the store and you'll see, it says, for example, St John's Wort. In big print, it'll say St John's Wort. And of course, in most cases, people go, no, what's all this crap about herbal products being banned? Look, you can get St John's Wort. But then when you walk over to the bottle and you take a close look, in microscopic print under the big letters of St John's Wort, it says equivalent. It's a synthesised product. A synthesised product. And of course the pharmaceutical industry can't patent a natural product. Plus, of course, natural products are all about prevention, not really about cure. And if you're actually preventing yourself from sick, then you're doing the pharmaceutical industry out of money. How dare you? So the smartest way for the pharmaceutical industry to deal with that little problem is to force all natural health products to be illegal on the basis that the efficacy... So products that have been around for thousands of years. Incredible, isn't it? So we're going to go a few more minutes, then we'll take a short break. Let's just close this half of the evening with a look at Norway. Remember this? In July 23rd? Well, I was actually giving a presentation at the Glastonbury Symposium the following day. So this broke on the Friday, I think that must have been July 22nd. And I was due to give a presentation just shortly after lunch on the Saturday, the 23rd. Well, of course, when this broke on the Friday, I had my suspicions that maybe it wasn't what it seemed. But, you know, the mainstream media had to get it out there, didn't it? Al-Qaeda massacre. Al-Qaeda massacre. All of the people, I mean, the first things they get out there is an Al-Qaeda massacre. Well, in reality, I mean, I assume that the papers didn't actually have to go to the print until around about probably 9 o'clock at night on the Friday. Well, by 7:30 on the Friday, I'd already established a template. I already knew what was happening, and of course I knew it was nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. Norway's 9/11, I mean, of course it was a terrible tragedy, and we're still not at the bottom of what occurred here. But, once again, let's take a look at what's going on here. This is the government building. We'll talk about that for a while too. There we go. The rampage of the blonde, blue-eyed assassin. The blonde, blue-eyed assassin. But you know, here's the big question. You see there, why Norway? Yeah, and the explanation, of course, the deep explanation of why Norway. But maybe there's another reason. And that reason is not dissimilar for everything we've just been talking about with Japan and Germany. Because Norway had also just endorsed Palestinian statehood. And this is why the pressure's mounting right now, why we have to be very vigilant, because the vote is later this month, isn't it? Norway's endorsed Palestinian statehood. Norway had also announced that it was going to withdraw all its troops from Libya, because Norway had realised that this humanitarian intervention was something else. And Norway really didn't want to be part of it. I mean, Norway was only participating under sort of acute pressure. But then in early July, they announced they were going to pull all of their forces out of the Libyan operation. They didn't want to be part of it. And then finally, strike three, Norway had withdrawn investment funding from all Israeli firms involved in developing West Bank settlements. Israel has a problem right now. It has a massive problem. Because many Israeli citizens, particularly Jewish immigrants, are starting to realise that they've been hoodwinked and that they are being used by the Zionists as a shield for the Zionist agenda. 100,000 people a year are leaving Israel. Israel's got massive problems in terms of protests, particularly amongst young people right now. And it's got problems with rapidly rising food prices. Not being reported in the media, but you can find it in the alternative media if you go look for it. And this is because many Israeli people, many Jewish people are beginning to realise that the Israeli government is a Zionist entity. And it's not looking after the best interests of the Jewish people. It's looking after the best interests of the global corporatists. And that's why it's so important to differentiate between the Zionist and the Jewish agenda here. On the Friday that this blew, I thought, well, I've got to Google. I had no idea, I couldn't remember anything, but I had to Google Al-Qaeda blue-eyed blondes. And I found a whole bunch of stuff from 2008, which was sowing the seeds that the new breed of Al-Qaeda terrorist was going to be a blue-eyed blonde. Take a look at this.
Also, we're going to talk more about the controversial subject regarding Al-Qaeda. Are they recruiting a white army now in Great Britain? Some people say it's 1,400 people strong, and why is that important? Because this is what we've always talked about, that if you have people in one country transplanting to another religion, they maybe aren't exactly what you think they are, that can be more difficult to fight.
Yeah, they're converting them in prison to kill us. Muslims. Yeah, okay, great.
They're recruiting them in prison to kill us. In other words, what's happening is that the young Muslims are starting to realise that it ain't the smartest thing to do to get involved with the security services and participate in fake exercises, because you might not actually survive. So here was the mindscaping 3 years ago, preparing people for Al-Qaeda's latest weapon, the blue-eyed blonde. Well, this is a press release from the day before 9/11. So once again, this is, by the way, the same day that Dov Zakheim, the guy who was the board member of Flight Systems Inc., when he announced that the Pentagon couldn't count $2.3 trillion, in the same day, the Washington Times ran an article, and in that article it said, Mossad are ruthless and cunning, having the capability to target US forces and make it look like a Palestinian-Arab act. And this was an extract from the report issued by the US Army School of Advanced Military Studies. Incredible, isn't it? So I'm going to close this first half. Well, it's more the first half. This is the first 3 quarters. We'll have a short break, and then bring the whole evening to a conclusion. I'm going to show you something before we break. Before you rush, watch this, because this is very important. This is very important in terms of understanding how the Zionists operate.
Yours is a voice of criticism we don't often hear in the United States. Often when there is dissent expressed in the United States against policies of the Israeli government, people here are called anti-Semitic. What is your response to that as an Israeli Jew?
Well, it's a trick. We always use it. When from Europe somebody is criticizing Israel, then we bring out the Holocaust. When in this country people are criticizing Israel, then they are anti-Semitic. And the organization is strong and has a lot of money, and the